Okay, now I want to start off with a show of hands for anyone who's ever felt stuck in life. Maybe stuck with a project, a decision, or simply just stuck in their own life. Okay, how about somebody who's ever felt too nervous or scared for something that shouldn't be as intimidating as it is, or even just scared for no reason at all? Let's get a show of hands for anyone who's ever doubted their worth. These are feelings that have led 1 in 4 people in this room to struggle with what experts call a mental health illness. And to be fully vulnerable, I've been in that 25%. If you don't know me, my name is Soren Seeliger. Today I want to talk about mental health, specifically the role of accessibility to nature, exploring, and outdoor recreation, which I'll just dub the outdoors today. So a little background on me. I moved into the city of Reno with my mom when I was 9, and I grew up nestled in the foothills of the Sierras with my dad often taking me mountain biking, skiing, and hiking, so it was a very odd change for me. But despite being then my dad enrolled me in T in my freshman year of high school. And within the first week, I had 40 pounds on my back and 10 miles in front of me. But despite being the most unathletic kid there, I didn't feel left out. I didn't feel left out because we were all taking in the same scenery. We were all suffering the same sore legs. In my junior year, my class backpacked the South Bass Trail of the Grand Canyon. I was more whooped than ever, yet something burned bright in me, a sense of satisfaction or simplicity. Come my senior year, I was tasked with this capstone project. I knew immediately that I wanted to talk about the outdoors, but also something real and raw, something that every person in this room, regardless of race or gender or origin, can find themselves in. So I landed on mental health. So, my essential question: how does the outdoors benefit mental health? To guide my studies, I posed 5 more specific questions. How has mental health changed for the average American in the past 20 years? What populations are most affected by mental health crises, and what makes those populations vulnerable? Can exposure to the outdoors remedy some of these issues? And can time spent in nature help build one's sense of self, specifically time alone or in pursuit of outdoor recreation? And that brings me to mental health. The Guardian tells us, shout out to Angus for letting me use that picture. The Guardian tells us that we are a generation suffering from isolation and dependency on social media and cell phones. And a survey from the Independent UK suggests that 1 in every 8 people reported feeling like they are not good enough, meaning 80% of people were feeling like they're falling behind one another. I'll follow that by addressing the rise in suicide rates in the past 20 years. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, the suicide rate in the US has gone from 10 deaths by suicide per 100,000 in the year 2000 to 14 per 100,000 in 2020. That is nearly a 40% increase. Interestingly, for men, the stat is 22.8 per 100,000, whilst for women it is 5.7. Men are also far more likely to be reported for substance abuse or antisocial personality disorder, despite women being far more likely to be diagnosed and treated for mental health illnesses, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research. This suggests that men tend to avoid seeking help, or even knowing when they may need it, as diagnosis and treatment of mental health illnesses almost always begin with the person seeking help. Traits or habits that may result in this trend look like a dismissal of personal needs, a fear of judgment, or a need to be independent. And these traits are not just expressed in men. They're completely circumstantial and often shown primarily in men due to stigma built into social norms, as the PMC National Library of Medicine states. Stigma rests even in the name by calling mental struggles an illness or a disorder. And that will bring me to my fieldwork. So for my fieldwork, I drove on down to Mammoth, Wild Willie's Hot Springs, where I camped. Then I went down to Death Valley and Yosemite. At each of my destinations, I observed the natural beauty, the locals, the visitors, and my psychological response to being in these places. I want to tell you all about my stories and my findings. So even before my trip started, I was throwing some curveballs. Despite that, when I eventually did get to Mammoth, the shift in my plans didn't ruin my time. I got supplies in the village, bathed in the hot springs, and made some friends. I was able to camp just off the road entirely legally, which is one of my favorite parts about Mammoth. I was woken by the sun screaming through my windows and a beautiful view of the Sierras before I set out on my way to Death Valley through Bishop and Lone Pine. When I arrived in Death Valley, I hiked the Little Bridge Canyon Trail, which was not even a trail, it was a wash. My light died after dark, but it was still a memorable experience. I slept in the overflow at the Sunset Campground. When I woke up, my car was boiling. I set out to tour the valley. I visited Zabriskie Point, 20 Mule Team Canyon, Dante's View, the Badwater Basin, Mesquite Dunes, and Panamint Valley. I'd like to share some of my favorite photos from the experience, which I took in Zabriskie Point, Dante's View, Panamint Valley, and Mesquite Dunes. Death Valley was an anomaly to everything that I knew. Salt flats that span the lengths of cities, several stories lower than the very sea. They held the foothills of peaks that towered up to 11,000 feet. The air was thick and hot. The land was void of even a hint of moisture. Yet the valley held oases of flourishing life and fields of wildflowers that engulfed entire valleys. At the end of day 3, I drove back out to Lone Pine to minimize my driving the next day. Day 4, which was made up entirely of a grueling 9-hour drive to Yosemite because Tahoe was closed. So, Yosemite. I arrived in Yosemite pretty late that night. Woke up the next morning. I looked up from my car window, and there's just El Capitan right there. It was beautiful. Yosemite was one of the most stunning places that I'd ever been. But aside from the raging waterfalls and the staggering cliff faces, the park let me down. Despite it being one of the slowest times of the year, the park was packed. My camping site was in the center of an absolute city of campgrounds. Some visitors were harmfully uneducated, and some were just rude. I was able to converse with a good amount of people, but not a single person felt comfortable with taking an interview. This is very odd for me, coming from such an open mountain town. Shout out to you guys. A town where belonging means a community that always helps and shows you authenticity. I left the park at 11 the next day, driving 5 hours back home, where I plotted the next part of my plan. That brings me to Kokomo and my Uncle Dan. After my trip, I called up my Uncle Dan to find more insight on what the outdoors provide to us and vice versa. Dan, along with his wife, Silvina Verdun, have helped pioneer the conservation efforts of Kokomo Valley in Chile since 1999. In 2022, the developer acquired Fondo Puchugin, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, an 124-acre plot of land in the center of Kokomo. The developer proposed resorts, infrastructure, and even gondolas for high-paying clientele. Dan and his community were not going to let that happen. They negotiated the price of the land, which was originally $150 million for months. Eventually, they negotiated down to $67 million, giving birth to Conserva Puchugin, a nonprofit made by the local community to raise the money to purchase the land. This caught the attention of Patagonia, who tasked Dan and his friend, Rodrigo Condesa, to cover the story, which headlined in May of 2025. The result, you may ask? By December of the same year, they had purchased the land. They were able to make reservations mandatory and open a visitor center that required all visitors to go through 10 minutes of education to protect the ecosystem and prevent accidents. To me, this is what I think conservation should look like. So I asked Dan to describe a time that he had turned to the outdoors for the betterment of his mental health. And in the back of his Sprinter van, he told me, "I work in a place with no roads, 5-hour hikes in the heart of nature. We go through all season of educating and guiding people, telling them where to go to the bathroom, when to go to the bathroom. At the end of the season, I'm tired. I like to go on big long hikes or go climb by myself, and it feels great. Go at your own rhythm. Sometimes I sit down and just think about life. The freedom and time in nature to think about those kind of things, it's really healthy. There's nothing like it. I only spend my time on what I really want to do in that moment. That'll bring me to accessibility to the outdoors. Trying to understand my disappointment in Yosemite, I put together a list of factors that restrict accessibility to the outdoors in modern day-to-day life, what they may look like. So imagine this. You are overloaded with work and you need a break. You can't afford a big getaway, let alone taking the time off. You think since logistics and money are barriers, you could still spend the weekend or even the night camping close to home. The good ending, you have a peaceful weekend. Okay, now let's assume you live deep in LA. You could be looking at 3 hours of driving just to get to Joshua Tree. All right, let's say that gas isn't $6, so finances aren't a barrier. We'll also assume that you have a flexible job, so logistics aren't a barrier either. Then comes intrinsic motive. Do I really want to drive 3 hours just to see some rocks in the desert? Probably not. Some months pass, and you're stressed and eager to take a break. You've been saving up for this big trip to Zion. You've been seeing, and since you've worked so hard, your request for a week off of work has been accepted. You have your eyes on this crystal clear pool, with a little waterfall running straight into it. You've been seeing it all over Instagram. So you go to buy a permit for that hike, and you find out that you have to wait 3 years, and still you only have a 1 in 10 chance of pulling a permit. Why you sulk to your Google Gemini? Gemini tells you it's because the scarcity of permits stress the importance of conserving that little waterfall. Not to mention, the foot traffic would erode the soil and cause the crystal clear water to not be so crystal clear. Oh well, maybe in 3 years you think. But you probably don't live in LA, and you hopefully don't work 7 days a week. If all you have is a day or a weekend, I seriously urge you to go on a hike, drive in a random direction, maybe sleep in your car. If you have the time and money, take a trip. And that'll bring me to my budget. So, for my personal budget, thanks to funding from some of the audience here today, thank you guys, T was able to fund me $1,000. I calculated my budget to be $968. I left lots of room for error and emergency, rounding up in every calculation. Overall, I used 79.3% of my budget, yet that extra $200 could have been vital in the case of an emergency. So divided up, my trip cost an average of $256 per destination, with Yosemite by far being the most expensive and least accessible, due to the need for permits, tickets, and the high prices for gas and food nearby. Death Valley was exceptionally accessible, with only a $30 park fee, and the majority of the cost, for me at least, being the drive. And Mammoth, very accessible, with no camping regulations or fees, and only being 3 hours away, with cheap gas on the way, Carson City, and recreational outlets and scenery all around. So I made a list of accessible locations. They're within a 4-hour distance and have no requirement for reservation or permits for recreation and camping. If you by the way, if a park ranger comes up to you, do not quote me on that. If you like hiking or backpacking, you could go to places in the Tahoe National Forest, like Big Chief or Donner Pass. The Tahoe National Forest allows dispersed camping. Please note that does not include campfires. If you're into climbing, you could drive just 20 minutes up the I-80 corridor with famous boulders and rock walls up the Old 40 and dispersed camping along the trail and road system. Big Chief is also great for that. If you're a fisherman, you could utilize the dispersed camping policy, again in the Tahoe National Forest, to access any of the reservoirs, rivers, and lakes nearby. Make sure you have a fishing license. And if you just want to camp somewhere scenic, I would recommend driving down to Mammoth Lakes, where you can camp at the hot springs, visit the Devil's Postpile and the ghost towns, and so much more that the area has to offer, with recreational opportunities all around to spark your interest. So going back to the beginning, I asked you 5 guiding questions, and now I'd like to take a chance to answer those. In the past 20 years, the average American has become far more prone to experiencing a mental health crisis. For every 10 suicides 20 years ago, there will be 4 more now. We've grown isolated by our phones, social media, social norms, and addictions. And modern solutions, in my opinion, often fail to prioritize the power that the outdoors has. Men, especially in isolated environments, are far more likely to suffer in silence. This is caused by stigma and social norms and upbringings. Exposure to the outdoors is not a remedy for struggling with mental health, but a tool to help navigate challenges. Time spent in nature allows opportunity to build one's sense of self. More so, it gives us the opportunities to observe ourselves without extrinsic influence. So for my big question, now, how does the outdoors benefit mental health? As I said, we have the opportunity to be ourselves without any extrinsic influence. According to the APA, natural stimuli improves cognitive function, sleep quality, and mood. The primitive instinct to play or to explore provides endorphins and serotonin as well as promotes exercise. Being in nature helps develop our brains. Spending more time in nature, especially during developmental stages of upbringing, decreases your likelihood from suffering from a mental illness. And that'll bring me to my final product. Using my interview with Dan and with photos and videos from my expeditions and from my connections, I seek to create a short film and/or short-form videos that'll bring awareness to the declining trends in mental health in the past 20 years, as well as the decline in environmental prosperity and accessibility to the outdoors. I seek to create a short film and/or short-form videos that will help inspire activism for mental well-being in nature and education and land conservation, so that our children and grandchildren can carry the traditions of being in nature, outdoor recreation, and exploration. I would upload a short film video or a short film to YouTube and short form videos to Instagram and TikTok. I will also continue my pursuit of conservation at the University of Montana, where I'll study forestry to chase my dream as a wildland firefighter. That was very underdramatic. Yeah! I told you I control you guys. Oh, not yet. Put that hand down, Kimberly. We're not there yet. So what did I take away from this experience? I realized that mental health isn't built off of freedom alone. Being able to take that step back helped me be certain of who I am. It reminded me that I have doors of opportunity down every path, and people that make my life feel whole. But pressure in my life didn't just disappear. Still, I cherish whenever I can take the breath away from the same classes every day, the same orange chicken from Rayleigh's, the same questions I ask myself day after day. That's stress. We all have that stress. And we all have routines that keep us too comfortable to face what's causing it. And to be honest, that responsibility will never get less overwhelming. And the outdoors are glorified by movies, media, and books as some escape from responsibility. That's not what it is. The outdoors gives us a chance to be challenged, to see ourselves and what we have in a new light. And that opportunity is only becoming more and more strained because of the growing presence of economic strain, growing cities, and algorithms that make millions from isolating us. And I'm not saying that we need to escape from our realities to the great outdoors. But I'm saying if you're overwhelmed or scared or feeling like you're not good enough in a moment, close down your mind, climb a rock, hike a trail, ski or run, ride your bike. And it won't fix everything. It might give you the hand you need to get what you want out of life. And that brings me to the thanks I want to give. Not yet, Kimberly. Thank you to all the T parents and donors who helped fund this study, the teachers and faculty who helped me every step of the way, our stellar fieldwork coordinator, Liam, for helping me envision my final product, my dad and my OSIC, Liz, for making sure I was safe every step of the way, and most importantly, all of you. This project, as well as my classmates' projects, would not mean a thing if we couldn't give it back. So take this as a sign to go make the most out of every moment. Thank you. I'd love to answer any questions.